Thank you for that introduction. This presentation is really going to dovetail into um, much of what Debbie discussed with the product title. A lot of these things are very closely related and integrated. I'm from the Office of Pharmaceutical Quality within the Center for Drugs. I just want to give you a briefing on what we do in Office of Pharmaceutical Quality. So a quality product of any kind consistently meets the expectations of the user, and drugs are no different. Patients expect safe and effective medicine with every dose that they take. Pharmaceutical quality is assuring every dose is safe and effective and free of contamination and defects. It is what gives patients confidence in their next dose of medicine. So we're going to jump right into drug product nomenclature. So the learning objectives for today, when we're done, you'll be able to explain why drug product nomenclature is important. You will know the three main components of drug product established name, and when creating an established name, you'll know what references you can go to when you need to develop propose a name for your product. So let's start off with some of the rules and the laws and the things that sort of guide what we do. So in the Food and Drug Cosmetic Act in Section 502E discusses the established name. Here has a lot of legal information here. So let's break it down for you. So the Food and Drug Cosmetic Act in that section speaks about ingredients and drug products having established names. So we typically think of established names as just for drug products, but the ingredients, the drug substances also have established names, and we're required to use those names in labeling. Specifically for the active ingredient, the established name for the active ingredient and the amount is required in labeling as well. And then the Food and Drug Cosmetic Act also points to the official compendium, which is the United States Pharmacopoeia. So if there's an article that's recognized in the official compendium, which is the USP, and that article, whether it's a drug substance or whether it's a drug product, if their product is recognized in USP, that is the name that you have to use. And Debbie's previous talk spoke about that as well. So a consistent message here. So in a sense, drug nomenclature can be relatively easy if your product is already a subject in the USP monograph. It's very easy, just use that title. But what do we do when the product is new and there is no USP monograph for your drug product? So that's sort of the essence of what we'll discuss today. So I sort of think of drug product nomenclature sort of like the author Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and also he wrote a thing, First Things First. I sort of think of this, he talks of this idea of beginning with the end in mind. So creating drug product nomenclature, sort of think of it as, what is the end going to be? Previously, Debbie spoke about drug products coming onto the market, and then ultimately USP will create a monograph for that product. USP will use their nomenclature guidelines and their rules for creating names to name the monograph associated with the monograph associated with the product. So to avoid FDA creating an established name that may be changed when USP creates a monograph, we have to begin understanding that ultimately the drug product will have a USP monograph, and we need to develop the title to sort of match that. So when we're creating an established name, particularly for products that have a salt for the active ingredient, we have to consider the salt policy. We have to also use nomenclature guidelines that USP provides. We also look at Chapter 1151, Pharmaceutical Dosage Forms, which describes the physical form of the dosage form and describes it. And then also, as previously discussed, the draft title guidance has a lot of good information in terms of route of administration and also dosage forms as well. So these are sort of the references and the things that we use. So we'll go through some other things about established name. What is the established name? So drug substances have established names. We can look to USAN, the United States Adopted Name Council, in providing established names for drug substances. Also, USP has monographs for drug substances as well. And fairly uncommon is the use of the common or usual name. But for the most part, USAN or USP will have an established name for the drug substance. Our main talk today is drug product. But I still want to bring home the point that if you have a product, the ingredients, if the ingredients within your product are recognized in USP, that is the name you have to use for your ingredients in general. So drug product nomenclature, there's 3 components of drug product nomenclature. We have the drug component, we have the route of administration component, and then also the dosage form component. So those are the three big things. So when you go home, remember those are the big components of the name. Established names are important because they affect exclusivity determinations, specifically with the dosage form influencing that. Also, generic product development. Oftentimes, products may have the same dosage form. Companies may use different technologies. For example, I have here the extended release tablet. A reference drug may come with an osmotic type of osmotic technology in the extended release tablet. And then another company may want to produce an extended release tablet and use a different technology. But in terms of naming the product in a dosage form, we want to use a dosage form term and not include any of these specific technologies in the dosage form terminology or the established name terminology. Established names also, with respect to the dosage form, affect user fees and also prescribing decisions. Here are some examples. These are older examples of names for products where the name influenced behavior. So the first one we have here is a vaginal jelly, and unfortunately, a patient applied the jelly to toast, and then so we had to change the dosage form term from jelly, because jelly does communicate something to someone, to gel. And then vaginal capsules or vaginal tablets, although the physical dosage, the physical form of the product may look or appear as a tablet, but really it was not intended to be swallowed. Capsules and tablets are generally swallowed. So the dosage form term now for a product that needs to be inserted, even though it may look similar to a tablet, vaginal inserts. We have inhalation capsules that were intended to be placed inside a device, punctured, and then the contents of the device and the contents of the capsule were inhaled, intended to be inhaled, but often patients taking multiple medications, they may take the capsule out and swallow it, because typically you would swallow a capsule. But the dosage form term, inhalation powder. And actually a new one, gummies. We see these gummies often in dietary supplements and vitamins, but this is a new dosage form term now. We wanted to sort of take away that relationship with gummies and candy and things like that to the new dosage form term, and this is in 1151 now, is chewable gels. So products can be approved without proprietary names, without a brand name, but they must. Food and Drug Cosmetic Act requires that the product must have an established name or a non-proprietary name. So we're going to now go into drug product naming. How do you sort of create the name? And we're going to focus on the first component of the established name, which is the drug component. So the active ingredient is not a salt. I put non-salt here, but let's just say for the active ingredient is not a salt. Well, you use the established name of that drug substance in the name of the drug product. That part is simple. But if you have a drug product in which the active ingredient is a salt, you kind of have to take a step back, and then you have to look at what we have here for salts. So the salt, USP has a salt policy in Chapter 1121, and then we also have, CDER has a guidance on CDER's interpretation, implementation of USP salt policy. So generally when it's a salt, you want to use the name of the active moiety and not the active ingredient. And the idea behind it is sort of if a practitioner wants to prescribe a product or use a product in a patient, if the salt is not clinically significant, does it need to be in the name? Does the practitioner need to know that it's a hydrochloride or a hydrobromide if that really does not have any influence on how to use the product? That's sort of the idea behind the salt policy in a basic, in a simple way. So when we would include the salt in the name, really is if the salt is clinically important. If a product has a lot of sodium in it, and maybe you want to communicate that to the practitioner, then we may include the salt in the name. But the idea is that if the salt is clinically significant, then you want to include it in the name. So again, USP salt policy in Chapter 1121, and also CDER's guidance on naming of drug products containing salt substances, and an accompanying map that we have for it as well. So again, if you have a product that the active ingredient is salt, you want to look at these documents. And then what would it be without an exception? So of course there's exceptions. And essentially, again, I sort of put it in three main categories, but refer to the guidance for all the details. But essentially, if there's a clinical importance, then you want to include the salt in the name. Also, for historical reasons, if there's a product that's been on the market, an active ingredient, and the salt is in the name, let's just say it's Drugazide hydrochloride tablets, and then someone wants to develop an extended release capsule, it makes sense from a consistency standpoint to include the salt in the name just from a historical perspective. So practitioners are able to say, well, this patient was on a tablet, it's an easy dose conversion to a extended release capsule. And then there's also if there's any safety concerns as well. But again, consult the guidance to dig deep into salt nomenclature. That's a whole nother talk. But again, consult the guidance. Here's an example we have of a container label to show how to express the names on a container. Here we have the new drug capsules. This is the active moiety in the name and the strength of the product. And then as required by the Food and Drug Cosmetic Act to include that, the established name and the amount of the active ingredient, equivalent amount here of the salt. And then we have the reverse. If for some reason the salt needs to be in the name, and the name and the amount of the active ingredient are on the label here, we want to include what is the equivalent amount of the active moiety as well. Equivalent, and then in the prescribing information, you would want to include information regarding that. In the dosage forms and strength section, you would sort of have somewhat of an abbreviated. You really just want the reader to know 10 milligrams or the strength is reflective of if it's the active moiety or it's the salt. And then in the section 11, this full description section, which has all of the chemistry information in there, you would provide a full equivalency statement. So next we're going to move on to the route of administration. So the route of administration is generally included in the drug product nomenclature in the established name, because the route of administration does provide useful information to the user. So for example, in the first bullet here, we have a solution. The route of administration, sort of delineates, oh, it's an oral solution, which is a totally different product than, say, a topical solution in terms of its use. The second bullet, we have inserts. You can have vaginal inserts. You can have an ophthalmic insert. So the route of administration is an important aspect of naming products. And actually, the last one I like, a topical foam versus an injectable foam. So there's the aspect of communicating to the user. It's a topical foam versus an injectable foam. And then you have to consider there's also quality aspects to those different dosage forms as well in terms of sterility. Like an injectable product obviously would need to have need to be sterile versus a topical foam, maybe not, depending on its use. The draft guidance, again, has the nice appendix there with the common routes of administration that we would use in dosage form nomenclature. There are instances where the route of administration is not included in the established name. So this is specifically for the established name for the product, not the other aspects of labeling, because the route of administration is required in labeling. But this is specifically for when to not include the route of administration in the name of a product. And essentially when a route is understood, when the product is a capsule or a tablet in which it's understood that the route of administration is oral. Also topical for products for creams, ointments, and lotions is understood those products will be applied topically. So we do not have to include the route of administration in those dosage forms. Also injectable products, we include the route of administration in other aspects of the labeling, but not in the name. And then for suppositories, those are defined for rectal use. So you don't need to include rectal in the name. However, you would include it in the labeling. And USP nomenclature guidelines has a section on this topic of when not to include the route of administration in the dosage form. Third component of the established name is the dosage form component. So for using dosage form terminology for your product, you want to use USP's dosage form terminology. So the first step would be to identify the physical form of your product. Is it a powder? Is it a tablet? Is it a capsule? Is it an injection? Is it a solution? So once you define the form of it, you then have to apply and look at the USP's nomenclature guidelines, because depending on the dosage form, it can appear differently in the established name of the product. We'll go through an example of that. Many are familiar with the FDA Data Standards Manual for dosage forms, and also many of us use the Orange Book. But those dosage form terminologies should not be used in creating established names for your product. You must use the dosage form terminology in USP. Those other documents serve different purposes. So dosage form for naming, think USP dosage form terms. So let's go through a few examples. These are common questions that we receive regarding dosage forms, how to name the products for these dosage forms. So the first one we have here is drug tablets. So if a tablet is to be swallowed whole or may be chewed, keyword may be chewed, then the dosage form would be tablets. However, if you have a tablet that must be chewed or crushed, and there's no alternative route of administration, then the dosage form in the established name would be chewable tablets. So it's not appropriate to name the product a tablet and then label it that it must be chewed. It would be named a chewable tablet. And then for tablets that are to be dispersed in a liquid before administration, those will be tablets for oral suspension or tablets for oral solution. And the difference between the suspension and solution is that for a solution, both the active ingredient and all the excipients have to go into solution. So if just the active goes into solution and the excipients are still suspended, it still would be called for oral suspension, tablet for oral suspension. Here are some other dosage forms. Solid oral dosage form, we have sublingual tablets that are required to put under the tongue, buccal tablets, and you have those that are orally disintegrated, that are sort of designed to have a very rapid disintegration and to be able to administer without water. And then we also have lozenges as well. So here this is one we get a lot of questions on, a lot of questions. can't overstate how many times we get these questions. But, and they're good questions because they make sense. Intended, so powders, granules, and pellets that are intended to be administered directly. So topical powder, inhalation powder, nasal powders, they're administered directly, then the powder is used in the name of the product. You have an oral granule or oral pellet. They're administered directly, so it's easy in terms of naming it. We have the route of administration part and the dosage form. However, if the product is intended to be added to a liquid before it's ingested, we then bring in this idea of use of the word for, and for sort of signaling that something needs to be done, a liquid needs to be added to the dosage form so it can get to the ultimate, the intended form to be administered to the patient. So a powder that needs to be reconstituted and before it is swallowed would be a 4 oral suspension or 4 oral solution. Similarly for injectable products, if it's a solution, it's an injection. But if it's a powder or a lyophilized powder that needs to be reconstituted before it becomes into a solution, it would be 4 injection. And same for if it was a suspension. So this is sort of the idea when I said figure out the dosage form, the physical form, and then you have to consult the nomenclature guidelines to see, well, how does that dosage form, how do we name it in the product? Capsules, we have capsules for oral administration. Generally, capsules are for swallowing. We highly discourage using capsules as what I would say containers for granules or powders or pellets that need to be opened and put inside to be administered directly to where swallowing the capsule is not intended. So sometimes there are products that are designed that way. And the advice would be if you have a product that's an oral, granule, oil, powder, or pellet that should be administered directly, that we encourage you to package it in a packet, or one of the older terms we see is sachets. And then there's a guidance that discusses product design and minimizing medication errors. So injectables, I'm going to go through a full list here of injectables. It's a long list, and it's not for you to sort of look at each one, but just for fun, to go through all of the dosage forms that we have for injectables. So for a solution that's injectable, it's injection. And then, it's a powder, it's a solid, requires reconstitution. It would be 4 injections. We also have injectable emulsions. And then we have injectable suspensions. 4 injectable suspensions. Excuse me one moment. And then we have our extended release injectable suspensions. And then if you have to add a diluent to it, 4. So you sort of see the pattern here. And then we have additional dosage forms that are not recognized in USP yet. We're working with USP. We have an extended release injection, which is a solution. And then we also have an injectable foam. So we're working with USP on that. So all this to say there are a lot of different dosage forms for injectable products. And then for systems, topical dosage forms formerly known as patches. We have systems. So we have transdermal systems and we have topical systems. The difference being the topical systems are applied topically for a local effect, whereas transdermal systems are designed to release through the dermis and into systemic circulation. And we have a recent guidance, OPQ, the recent guidance on development of topical and transdermal systems. And there are also other systems too, intrauterine systems, which are commonly known as IUDs, intrauterine devices. We have periodontal systems and also ocular systems. I believe the ocular system product is no longer marketed, but we've had ocular systems approved. And then for modified release terminology, extended release or delayed release. So this rule here is straight from USP's nomenclature guidelines for you to read through. But the key points here are for modified release terminology. Immediate release is never used in the drug nomenclature. We never say immediate release, it's sort of understood. But there's only two other terminologies we would use: delayed release or extended release. Those are sort of the options for modified release. And then there's sort of rules here depending on the release pattern of the drug. And here's how they would appear in the names. So naming, the name is not expected to convey all the information about the drug. You need to use labeling statements to highlight important information. But the name does communicate some information to the user. So for example, if you have an extended release product, you understand that it provides you some information that maybe I don't have to take this product as often as I would if it was an immediate release product. That being said, you can have extended release products that have different duration of action or different frequencies. So you can have an extended release injectable product that may last 1 month. You can design it for 3 months or 6 months. So those labeling statements will work in conjunction with the modified release portion of the name. And then we used to have concentrate in the name for drug products. We no longer do that, but instead replace it with a labeling statement that says it must be diluted. We do have one exception here, and this is actually a nice quiz question. There's an exception. This exception, potassium chloride for injection concentrate. There's two things that's unusual about it. One of them is to have the concentrate in the name, and there's another one. We'll come back to that if we have time. See if someone can guess that. So here are the useful nomenclature references. USP nomenclature guidelines, 1121, 1151, and then also the SALT guidance. First question, establish name for a tablet that must be chewed. Anybody want to shout it out? Why is A wrong? And why is B wrong? And we know why D is wrong. So yes, C. So B is wrong because we do not include oral for a tablet name. Question number 2. What should the established name be? The active ingredient is drugazide hydrochloride. That should ring a bell. Ding, 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 ding. It's a salt. This is the first product of its kind, never seen before, brand new, totally new. Salt is clinically insignificant. It's a powder that must be reconstituted. It goes into solution before oral ingestion. D, I heard a B. Okay. So let's think, there's a few ways we can go about it, but the first part is, the first component is the drug component of the name. What should that be? All right, so the salt is clinically insignificant. This is totally new, so there's no historical things we have to consider. So drugazide, we know that's right. And then what about the route of administration? Should we include oral in there? Those are all the choices of oral. So we should include, or let's say if there was other, we should include oral because it's a solution, or it will go into solution, and it could be applied somewhere else, administered somewhere else. And then we also have that it goes into solution, so we know it's a solution. So the answer is D. And I believe that's it. So summary, Food and Drug Cosmetic Act requires use of the official title from USP. The 3 main components of the drug product name, drug component, route of administration, dosage form, and then your references. So I think now it's time for Debbie and I to, or